Hi guys, welcome back to 428 Shibuya Scramble. It's TT Gamer Girl signing off. So, last episode, we finished up... I want to say we finished up Achi and Maria's blocks. Yeah, those two are to be continued. And then we got a bad end at Ulsa. Because of something Kano said, or didn't say. And I just want to say that it's interesting how if you haven't started a character's story, a character's block, then it just automatically goes to the worst possible ending. Even though you've done nothing with the character that is corresponding to that bad end. So I haven't started Kano's current time block. And it was just automatically, yeah, you're getting Osawa's bad ending. It was the same thing with Maria. I hadn't started Achi's time block, and Maria just automatically got the worst ending possible. So we're gonna do Kano and get Osawa out of that bad end. Oh yeah. When the last block ended, Kano had come to a massacre. Kanon? Kano muttered. What's Kanon? A stench of blood hung heavy in the basement bar. Stanley was silent, staring at the criminal's corpse. Hey, do you know anything about this? Kano asked. Still, Stanley gave no response. Silent treatment again, huh? Kano huffed. The American glanced at him gravely. In all likelihood, the one who did this was acting alone. Alone? Against this many other people? Who on earth? There's no need for you to know. Cut the crap! Kano snapped. He grabbed Stanley by the collar. If there was someone involved in this case who's capable of something like this, I need to know about it. How am I supposed to do my job if you keep me in the dark? Stanley remained stone-faced. Look, I'm not afraid of the risks, Kano said. And I'll be a lot more effective if you at least fill me in on the basics here. The more you know, the sooner you'll wind up dead. Kano tightened his grip. But it's okay if I wind up dead while I'm still in the dark, huh? Fine, Stanley said. I'll answer your first question. He brushed Kano's arm aside. Kanan is the name of a covert operative from the Middle East. Simple terms, a type of spy that infiltrates hostile territory to carry out various clandestine activities. I believe she's the one who killed these people here. The Middle East? Covert operative? Kano hadn't expected spycraft to be involved with this. Yes. She's an assassin and a cryptanalysis specialist. Do you recall the mass jailbreak from Abu Ghraib prison a while back? Abu Ghraib? I've heard of that prison. Prison in Iraq, west of Baghdad. Under the Hussein government, it was an internment facility for political prisoners. But following the Iraq War, it was used by the U.S. Army to house prisoners of war. In April of 2004, photographs of detainees being tortured by U.S. soldiers were released, causing a massive scandal. Released or leaked? Kanan was the one who provided the intel the escapees used to get out. Kano was at a loss for words. The case was suddenly starting to seem a whole lot more sinister. Whoever this Kano was, she'd apparently nearly killed a dozen people with only a knife. She was clearly no one to trifle with. Just what kind of individual were they dealing with here? He could scarcely imagine. Once again, Kano surveyed the crime scene. Each of the murdered criminals had had his throat slit. From the look of the deep, clean cuts, the killer hadn't hesitated in the slightest. Okay, so then what connection does this Kanon have with the mastermind behind this kidnapping? If Kanon had killed all of the foreign syndicate members in this bar, did that mean she and the person behind the kidnapping were enemies? Or perhaps she and the kidnapper were working in concert, and she'd carried out these slayings as part of some plan to get rid of some loose ends. I believe I said I'd answer one question. Turning away, Stanley picked up a file from atop a nearby table. Apparently he wasn't in the sharing mood, as per usual with this guy. Realizing that further questions would be pointless, Kano peered sidelong at the file as Stanley opened it. Inside was a detailed map of Shibuya. There were various routes marked with arrows and times. That's the plan for the ransom relay. Kano was so excited he blurted his thoughts out loud. It appeared that the ultimate goal for the ransom was a condominium. The address and the time, 1420, were written in red ink. Kano put an immediate call to the investigation task force to relay this information. The final destination is Ground Hill number 405 in Hito 5-34, Shibuya. Alright, Kuze told him. We'll look into who owns the condo in question. You and Stanley head over there now. I'm sending backup to go in with you. You have authorization to apprehend the suspect. Finally, hearing the order that he'd so long been waiting for, Kano felt a spark of determination flare inside him. Alright, let's go, he said, some of his excitement slipping into his voice. Stanley, still solemn, closed the file and followed him out of the bar. Stanley drove along Inokashira Dori toward Hito, where the finish line for the ransom relay was located. His demeanor was cold and brooding, in sharp contrast with Kano's gun-ho readiness. He seemed lost in thought. He seemed lost in some deep and cheerless thought. Kuze's voice came in over the wireless as the cart came out onto the Meiji Dori. We've identified the owner of the condominium. It's... Kano held his breath in anticipation. The name Kuze spoke caught him by surprise entirely. Oh, come on! Unless there's a jump in us, yeah, this might be... There we go. The condominium, it's Mamoru Tanaka. He's a colleague of Kenji Osawa. What? Kano squawked. This was an unexpected twist. Kajiwara confirms that Tanaka left the Osawa residence at just after 1400 hours. No word on his movement since then. It's possible he headed to his private condo where the attaché case is slated to end up. Any officer who runs across Tanaka is to apprehend him on sight. Kuze cut the connection. This mastermind you've been chasing, Kano asked. Is it Tanaka? Stanley didn't reply. Fine, never mind. I just wish I could know if Tatano was safe. Still worried about that traitor, huh? So Stanley could ignore all of his questions, but still remember to make snide remarks. Sounds about right. Talking about Tatano's the only thing that gets a reaction out of you, isn't it? Kano snorted. What makes you so certain he can't be a traitor? Tatano just isn't like that. That's not an answer. Stanley scoffed. Alright, I've watched the man work for years. I know him. He has no reason to betray the Force. You watched him work, huh? What about his private life then? Do you know all about that too? He hasn't had money trouble? Anything like that? Kano felt his blood starting to boil. I don't care what you think. I trust Detective Tatano. Trust him? On what basis? I don't need any basis to have faith in someone, Kano snapped. Without any basis in fact, it's just plain sentimentality, Stanley said. There's no reason or logic to it. A thin smile came to his face. Be they friends or family, you can never really know other people. The only person you can trust is yourself. You've had some pretty bad dealings with other people, haven't you? Kano had no response for such an emotionless statement. He looked away. He and Stanley were just plain incompatible. I mean, I kind of honestly don't blame him if he has. Oh god, this was so long ago, but I had someone who I thought was my friend in middle school. And I was a dumb, gullible kid. I believed everything anyone would tell me. You could tell me the moon was made of cheese and I'd probably believe it back then. So a lot of the things that she would keep bringing up is horrible, horrible stuff that she claimed her mom and her sister would do to her. And I would just believe it. And like, you know, I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Next thing I know, I get called into the counselor's office and she's telling me she doesn't need my pity. I'm like, what? By the time I got into high school, I realized she'd been lying to me about everything. And nowadays, I find it kind of hard to trust some people, if not a lot. Like, when I first meet someone, like, I'm taking everything they say with a grain of salt nowadays. Until they have proven to me that they are not a lying son of a bitch, like that girl was. My anxiety might also have something to do with that, but actually, that might have been one of the reasons I started getting anxiety. Because I don't like being around people most of the time. Unless I'm like really good friends with them, like two people in particular. But otherwise it's like I have trust issues. I don't show it, or at least I try not to. But I unless you prove to me you are trustworthy, I have trouble believing a damn thing you say. It's been like that for years. It seemed like no amount of talking would let them get through to one another. Never take anything at face value, Kano. You start trusting too much, basically as good as dead. Like, I don't really believe that. I just don't want to be lied to again. But I know there are people out there who try to gain your trust so they can kill you, so... Kano just stared out the window. The Shibuya precinct came into view. Tanaka's condo was much farther now. They were outside of Tanaka's condo now. Over there, Stanley said, keeping his voice down. Across the street was one of the foreign syndicate members, walking briskly, the attaché case clutched in his stride. I'm making the arrest. Kano! Kano, wait! Stanley exclaimed. Kano heard him loud and clear, but he had no intention of stopping. He approached with the criminal at full speed, then leapt to tackle him around the waist. The two men fell to the pavement in a tangled heap. The collision sent the attaché case flying. Kano's eyes tracked the case for a moment too long. He was caught off guard when the man threw a punch at him. The blow caught him right in the jaw, snapping his head back. For a moment, Kano saw stars. As he shook off the impact, the man sprang to his feet and sprinted away in the direction of Stanley's car. Stanley! Kano shouted. Grab him or get the case. Grab him. Stanley ignored the man and instead went for the attaché case. Oh, come on! Really? Kano had no choice but to pursue the perp himself. He hadn't come this far just to let the crooks get away now. Suddenly, the fleeing man skidded to a stop. Several cars had pulled across the road ahead, and detectives were pouring out of them. His escape route cut off, the criminal resigned himself to capture. While Kano helped make the arrest, several of the other detectives broke into Tanaka's condo. Stanley, meanwhile, was carefully inspecting the exterior of the attaché case. He'd already opened it. It was stuffed with bundles of banknotes. The 50 million yen ransom was back in the police hands. This is a decoy, the American muttered under his breath. I wonder where. His words trailed off, but Kano had heard them. What did you expect? The detective demanded. Samples of that new drug in there? As usual, Stanley gave no reply. The look on his face, however, told Kano he'd been right on the mark. Some of the backup team emerged from Tanaka's condo. Kano turned to them, feeling a sudden surge of anxiety from Maria. What's the situation in there? He asked. They told him that they'd found no one in Tanaka's room. So the hostage's status remained unknown, and the main culprit had evaded capture. This case hadn't been solved. In fact, it was still unfolding in the worst way conceivable. And still, Stanley remained focused on the attaché case, pondering it with a thoughtful expression. Look, Kano told him, I'm going to request that I be returned to my normal duties. Maria still needs to be rescued, and I still need to find out what happened to Hitomi and Detective Tatano. For once, Stanley actually responded. Hitomi? Yes, that's it! It makes perfect sense that they'd have her carry it. Huh? What do you mean? This whole attaché case relay was a fake-out. Whoa, slow down, Kano said, wishing he could calm himself with his words. Explain what you're talking about. Somehow the kidnappers made contact with Kenji Osoa and got him to have Hitomi carry the drug separate from the ransom. Wait, you're saying they had Hitomi bring them the drug? Stanley nodded. The case handouts were a sort of camouflage, a way for them to keep the police distracted from their real goal. Kano nodded. It had indeed felt like the case relay was a decoy, an attempt to buy time. If this syndicate were after something else entirely, that would explain why so many of their actions had appeared to make no sense. So, Kano asked, what sort of drug is this? Why would they go to such lengths to get it in their hands? It's an antiviral, Stanley replied after some hesitation. A way to cure people infected with a very particular virus. What virus are we talking about? It's called UA. Kano never heard of it. Still, he could imagine the possibilities. Suppose this UA was something like the Ebola virus. Here we go. Infection causes Ebola hemorrhagic fever, resulting in a high fever and massive bleeding throughout the body. Oh, jeez. At present, there's no vaccine to prevent infection, nor any drug to cure the disease after a manifest. So you're screwed if you get Ebola. Or perhaps HIV. Human immunodeficiency virus. HIV destroys the cells that are essential for regulating cell-mediated immunity, considerably reducing the immune response. This effect can result in infections that would ordinarily be fought off, easily developing into serious illnesses. There are various treatments, but as of yet, nothing that will eradicate the virus completely. Even the ultra-familiar influenza, or the flu. There were medicines that could treat all those diseases. No! It's clearly said that there is no vaccine to prevent the Ebola virus, and there's no cure for it. But nothing that could cure them completely. Any drug that could do that would be worth vast sums of money. Kano, do you have any means of getting in touch with Mr. Osoa? Yes, I know one of the detectives stationed at his home. Check in with him ASAP. Find out whether or not he gave the antiviral to Hitomi. Kano suppressed his scowl. It looked like he wasn't done assisting Stanley yet. He got out his cell phone and dialed up Kajiwara. Kajiwara picked up promptly. Kano, what's going on? Could I speak with Mr. Osoa? I suppose it'd be alright. What for, though? There's something I need to confirm. I need him to confirm for me. It's an emergency. Alright. Just make sure not to tell him anything about the investigation. Sure thing. After a while, a man's hoarse voice came over the line. Osoa speaking. Can I help you? This is Detective Kano from the Shibuya precinct. Time is critical, so I need to just cut to the chase here. Kano took a deep breath. Did you give the antiviral drug to your daughter, Hitomi? Also, I let out a gasp. Alright. Let's get the other... Also has another jump to Kano. There we go. Did you give the antiviral drug to your daughter Hitomi? Also, I let out a gasp. What are you talking about? I'm the one asking the questions here, Mr. Osoa. Did you give the antiviral drug to your daughter Hitomi? I'm not sure I understand the question. Also, his voice trembled as he spoke. Kano was sure he'd hit the nail right on the head. I know what the syndicate is really after, Mr. Osoa. It's the virus. Also, I remained silent, and there's another jump. Mr. Osoa? Is everything alright? The line went dead. Did I? No, he's still on the bad end. It's you. Also, I remained silent. Mr. Osoa, is everything alright? Did that work? Maybe? Let's continue with Kano, though. The line went dead. Kano, Stanley chided. I would have put it more like this. They're after Hitomi because she has the antiviral. Ah, fine. She's Stanley. It's Hitomi. Also, I remained silent. Mr. Osoa, is everything alright? The line went dead. Guess that answers that well enough, Kano said as he put his phone away. Now it was clear why the criminals were after Hitomi. He saw an uneasy look on Stanley's face. Something on your mind? Kano asked. Stanley responded with a question of his own. If Hitomi was carrying the antiviral, how were the criminals planning on getting it from her? Kano thought for a moment. Well, taking her by force at the Scramble posed too high a risk, he said. There were nearly 100 detectives there, and they must have guessed there would be. That's why they devised the attaché case relay. They wanted to abduct Hitomi somewhere away from the Dragnet's notice. This was the plan that all the signs seemed to suggest. Still, he added, I wonder how they managed to lead her away from police protection. A look of revelation crossed Stanley's face. All they need to do was convince her to go of her own accord. But how? Kano asked. And then it came to him. He thought back to Hitomi's initial contact with Tariq al-Karawan. Just before he'd taken the attaché case from her, the two had a brief conversation. It was possible al-Karawan had given Hitomi some form of instructions then. Guess we're back to tracking down al-Karawan again, huh? Kano could tell from the look in Stanley's eyes that he was on the verge of saying something. Probably some remark about how Tatano had allowed al-Karawan to run free. Right now, Kano wasn't going to argue the point. After this case was resolved, he discovered what Tatano's real motives were. And once he did, Stanley would eat his words. In the meantime, we can't just wander around looking without any leads, he said. Until we get more intel. Let's see what we can do with the security cameras back at the precinct. Numerous monitors shone down on the pair as they entered the Shibuya precinct surveillance room. Each showed an array of faces of individuals somewhere in Shibuya. Kano asked one of the operators to pull up al-Karawan's data on the screen. I'm actually curious. We can't see all of it. Date of birth, February 15th, 1967. Place of birth, Iran. Height, 6'3". Unknown weight, medium build. Knows Arabic, English, and Japanese. Dark brown hair, black eyes. Male. Light complexion. No known scars and marks. Looks like it's mostly drug possession that he's known for. By selecting each of the faces on the monitors in turn, they could run a comparison to determine if anyone among them was al-Karawan. One by one, the operator made his way through the faces. Assuming their target was still in Shibuya, there was a high likelihood they'd find him. But the minutes ticked past and there was still no sign of him. Kano's tone grew more and more impatient as he directed the operator's search. Just calm down, Stanley said. He set a hand on Kano's shoulder. You keep wasting your energy when you don't need to. That's just how I do things, Kano replied. I'm energetic because I care. He pointed out another face to the operator. Well, you're setting yourself up for a short life. With a sigh, Stanley sank into a nearby chair. My brother was like you. The American spoke so quietly that his words were barely audible. 10 minutes later, a man clad in black. What would that mean? Appeared on one of the monitors. The operator lined up his cursor. The comparison check confirmed that it was al-Karawan. Yes! Kano hissed, pumping his fist. It appeared that their quarry was simply walking around town, Kano composed. Kano radioed in al-Karawan's location to Kuze. All units, intercept the suspect on the double, Kuze ordered. Kano will provide guidance using the surveillance monitors. They saw al-Karawan stop in front of a cigarette vending machine. Was he waiting for someone? Sasayama reporting. I've got my eyes on the mutt. Perpetrator. Oh. Police jargon. Usually when I hear mutt, you're talking about like a mixed breed? Or a mixed breed when it comes to dogs? Like you're not entirely sure what's in the breed? Or what I call myself, because I have so many European countries in my bloodline that I might as well be a mutt. Hook, put someone in cuffs, dipper, pickpocket, wants, standing warrants, hanging paper, write multiple citations, and other such. Kano's partner had evidently been nearby. "I'm making the arrest," he said. There was a note of courage in Sasayama's voice. He came into view on the monitor, walking casually. At some point, he ditched his anime nerd costume for a street dancer's getup. It didn't appear that Aokadawan had noticed him yet. Bit by bit, Sasayama would close the distance. Not much farther now. Kano's hand balled into a fist as he watched. And then, something unexpected happened. Another man came running into view, right in the middle of the monitor. Teruo Toyama. Oh god. Toyama! Damn it! There was no sound, but they could see that the newcomer was shouting something. As Aokadawan turned to look at the man, Sasayama launched himself like a bullet from a gun. In an instant, Detective and Perp were locked in a violent scuffle right there on the street. Kano swallowed a lump in his throat as he watched the struggle unfold. Earlier in the day, Aokadawan had done a number on Sasayama, but this time the detective had the upper hand. He got a grip on Aokadawan's neck and kneed him repeatedly. Aokadawan tried desperately to bring Sasayama to the ground, but Sasayama braced himself and avoided the takedown. Then he shifted his stance and took Aokadawan to the pavement with a spectacular hip throw. Yes! Kano clapped his hands together in excitement. Catching the perp in a scarf hold, Sasayama got out his handcuffs. A technique in judo involves wrapping an arm around the opponent's neck while performing an upper body pin. Interesting. Stanley, we should head to the scene, Kano said. He looked away from the monitor for a mere moment, and when he looked back, Sasayama had released his hold and crumpled to the ground. What? Panicked, Kano stared at the image of his friend. There was something... that's a knife! He got stabbed! Zoom in! Kano cried frantically. The camera closed in on Sasayama. Now Kano could see exactly what he'd feared. Sasayama had been stabbed in the gut. Blood pooled on the pavement around him. Kano screamed, Sasayama! The camera showed several other detectives arriving at the scene, capturing Aokadawan before he could escape. But Sasayama lay motionless. The pool of blood around him spread further and further across the pavement. Unable to look any longer, Kano rushed from the surveillance room. To be continued! Yes! Finally! We did a thing with Kano where we didn't get a bad ending. Because every one of Kano's time blocks so far have led to a bad ending at some point. Oh, man. So I think Sasayama's dead. Alright, well, next episode, we will continue Osawa's story, and if that ends up finishing real quick, we'll start Minorikawa, because those two are the only ones that have not made it to a to be continued yet. So, till then, this is the Gamer Girl signing off. Bye bye.